Germany, in 1472, a city where crime was licensed by the city itself. This is the city-owned brothel, an official municipal institution deemed a necessary evil. The city council sanctioned its operation and pocketed the profits. But when a prostitute named Els was forced into a violent late-term abortion by her keepers, the meticulously constructed system of hypocrisy broke wide open. Els's quiet courage triggered an investigation that didn't just expose individual wickedness. It laid bare a horrifying system of systematic beatings, deadly disease, and relentless exploitation that the city not only tolerated, but actively encouraged for financial gain. This is not a story about abstract morality. This is about money, power, and a horrifying truth. That for centuries, social stability was built on the suffering of others. Don't look away. You're about to see the first
bring your friend
thin
over
crack
here, we're
in that
thirsty.
wall of hypocrisy. The evil necessity and the price of profit. Nordlingen, 1472. A freezing night. A young woman, a prostitute in the municipal brothel, carried thin soup, her hands shaking. She was weeks into a pregnancy, forced to work regardless. Then, suddenly, her stomach was flat. In that confined room, a foul concoction was mixed into her wine, a violent act of chemical expulsion. Who did this? And why was an entire city, the magistrate, the council, the treasury, profiting from a corruption so deep it enforced near homicide? Her name is Els. Her simple, devastating testimony will become the key that will unlock a door the entire city council wanted sealed shut. Stay with me, because after the third knock, every hidden secret will finally crumble. Mankind calls prostitution the world's oldest profession. But the powerful church, the moral engine of medieval society, had a different, more cynical label. An evil necessity, malum necessarium. This concept was the intellectual and spiritual bedrock upon which the municipal brothel was built. Priests and scholars argued that men's supposed uncontrollable, sinful urges had to be safely directed somewhere, an outlet to prevent a far worse moral and social catastrophe, like corrupting respectable wives or committing the gravest sin, sodomy. The conclusion was stark and merciless. To maintain the facade of social order and protect the purity of the respectable classes, one group of women must be designated to carry all the filth, the shame, and the spiritual burden of the entire city's compromise. This institutionalized sacrifice was seen as the cold, practical cost of stability. The odor of this profound, self-serving hypocrisy hung thick in the air. The city council, in this view, wasn't just collecting revenue. They were acting as moral custodians, protecting the greater good at the expense of a few nameless women. Their profit was simply the reward for maintaining order. And then the so-called necessary evil stopped being theory and landed on a single body. From that foundation, Elsa's story drops us into the next chapter. Forced abortion and the lie of protection. Forced abortion and the lie of protection. The horror that unfolded for Els was the inevitable product of a system built on total power and zero accountability. Els, originally a vulnerable young woman, was brought to the house as a kitchen maid.
To our prosperity.
The keepers, the brutal Lionheart Freyamat and his partner Barbara Tarshenfeiden, quickly saw the profit potential in forcing her into sex work, a common, quiet breach of contract. Once she was in the system, she was trapped. If she dared to utter the word no, the stinging lash of the belt or the cruel bite of the bullwhip said yes for her, a chilling daily reminder of where all the power lay. Cities across Europe readily licensed, regulated, and even owned these brothels, a testament to the powerful allure of their tax revenue. The income funded bridges, fortifications, and public works. To maintain a shred of respectability, the houses were universally pushed to the city limits, strategically placed near the executioner's house, near the gallows. On paper, city contracts stipulated rules forbidding blasphemy, and keepers had to swear solemn oaths. But in practice, who was truly protected by these flowery, legalistic documents? Certainly not the women. When Els became pregnant by a client, the keeper's ruthless partner, Barbara, decided her fate. A pregnant prostitute was an unproductive asset, a drain on revenue.
Coming with me, woman.
Barbara mixed a vile, powerful cocktail: dyer's weed and wine, a known, violently effective abortive agent. She forced Els to consume it. The pain, as Els later described, was excruciating, a searing agony. The fetus, tragically, was nearly 20 weeks developed and was brutally expelled. Given absolutely no time to recover, barely coherent from the ordeal and pain, Els was immediately pulled back to work. For the keepers, this was cold, pragmatic business. Money had to be made from fresh wounds, from the blood and trauma still clinging to her body. This act, sanctioned by the silence of the city's profit motive,
I hereby
was the breaking
swear
point.
upon this holy
But
book
wounds don't
that
stay
I shall
hidden beneath
uphold
the
the
blanket
laws
of
of this
profit for
city,
long.
so help me
As
God.
truth seeped through the brothel's walls, the first voice broke into a scream, opening the next act. The scream that broke the silence. The cover-up failed immediately because the evidence was too visible and the trauma too large to hide. A fellow prostitute, Barbel von Esslingen, a woman hardened by the same life, yet possessing a sliver of conscience, was the one to first find the body of the fetus lying tragically on a bench in Els's room. In a house where secrets were the currency of survival, this was one horror Barbel could not keep silent about. She started whispering. The information flowed out of the brothel walls with the clients, and soon tavern patrons across Nördlingen began to notice something amiss. They commented that the one who was big is now small, the crude but unmistakable observation that something terrible had happened. The gossip was too persistent, too loud, and eventually the whispers reached the ears of the city council. This was no longer a private matter. It was a public scandal that threatened to expose the fragility of the entire profitable enterprise.
We have to leave
Two
now,
city officials sent less for justice than for immediate damage control visited the brothel. They delivered a chilling warning to the keeper, Lionheart Freyamat, that an official investigation was imminent. Enraged, his authority questioned, and his revenue stream threatened, Lionheart rushed immediately to Els. He delivered a savage, severe beating, attempting to instill the fear that had kept the women silent for years. But on that day, Els was transformed. The loss of her child, the physical pain, and the sheer injustice coalesced into a fierce, protective defiance. She didn't cower. She screamed back at him with an astonishing, fearless clarity. "You must chop off my arms and legs to keep me from testifying." It was a declarative statement of total resistance, and that single scream echoing through the halls of the brothel became the first true crack in the system's wall. Lionheart and Barbara tried one last, desperate deal. They offered to clear her enormous engineered debt and allow her to leave the brothel for good, provided she stayed silent. Els accepted, seeing a chance for freedom. However, before her dawn escape, she made a crucial decision. She confessed the entire plan, along with the full devastating truth, to another trusted woman, Margaret von Biebrach. A sliver of uncontainable truth had broken free. That was enough. A scream doesn't just rattle tyrants, it unlatches the door to justice. From here, the investigation had to open, and the machinery of debt and violence would stand exposed. The uncovered system of abuse and debt. With Els's confession secured and public pressure mounting, the city was forced to initiate a formal investigation. The very first charge, aimed squarely at Barbara Tarschenweiden, was for homicide, or the destruction of a soul, Seelenmord, as a late-term abortion was viewed under the severe legal and spiritual codes of the time. Crucially, Els, protected by her courageous public testimony, was not implicated. She was able to describe with heart-wrenching detail the deep, inconsolable grief she felt for her lost child. This initial focus on the abortion, however, quickly became the catalyst for uncovering a rot far deeper and more systemic. As the inquiry broadened, the horrific full scale of the brothel's operations was laid bare. Spurred by Els's bravery, almost every woman in the house came forward. Their testimonies painted a consistent and shocking picture of systemic brutality. They were beaten viciously for the slightest infraction. Often, for the simple act of refusing a client they found repulsive. The keepers weaponized every necessity of life to maintain control. The women's personal clothes were confiscated and held for ransom, a tactic designed to perpetually keep them indebted and unable to flee with dignity. Even the law was ignored. They were forced to work, a grueling, non-stop schedule, even during holy days and during menstruation, a specific illegal violation of the official city contract that promised them rest. Though the city contracts promised extra food during menstruation, the women were instead fed disgusting slop, barely edible, rotting food, and were charged absolutely exorbitant prices for every cup of wine and every meager meal, ensuring their debts ballooned exponentially. Lionheart, the ruthless accountant, even invented a charge called sleeping money, a fee levied on the women if their overnight client failed to show up, penalizing them for lost revenue. They were, by design, locked in an inescapable, soul-crushing cycle of debt, exploitation, and violence. The only final exit from that house, for many, was not freedom but the coffin, succumbing to disease, exhaustion, and physical abuse long before their time. The investigation revealed that the city was not merely licensing a business, it was actively enabling a sophisticated and profitable engine of human slavery. Yet the visible brutality was only half the hell. The other half was an invisible plague creeping from bed to bed, pushing us into the medical and moral price no one wanted to claim.
A lovely
Disease,
for the
judgment, and the final price. Amidst the internal scandal of abuse, a far greater invisible crisis loomed, the terrifying spread of the foreign disease, what we now understand as syphilis. Since its explosive appearance in the late 15th century, no one wanted to take responsibility for this horrifying, disfiguring plague. In a frenzy of geopolitical and religious blame, the French called it the Neapolitan disease. The Russians blamed the Poles. But in the end, in the narrow confines of Nördlingen and everywhere else, everyone blamed the women. The entire disease, this unknown deadly scourge, was pathologized as a direct consequence of their sin. The powerful church declared it a divine punishment, a direct, physical manifestation of the wages of sin, and the ultimate, inevitable consequence of Eve's original transgression. The attempts at a cure were as terrifying as the disease itself. Medieval doctors prescribed poisonous mercury to be rubbed directly into the sores, a heavy metal that caused neurological damage and organ failure. They used leeches. Some folk remedies even advised desperate men to hit their genitals with a heavy object to shake the illness out. These horrifying remedies only multiplied the suffering, turning the brothel into a charnel house where women often died slowly, poisoned both by their clients and their supposed healers. The foreign disease was the ultimate, inescapable price of their existence within the system. Finally, the municipal investigation concluded. The council was forced to act, publicly sacrificing the keepers to protect the city's own reputation. Lionheart Freyamot and Barbara Tarshenfeiden were permanently banned from the city, forbidden from ever returning to Nördlingen or operating a business again. For the crime of the late-term abortion, deemed the most severe, Barbara was publicly branded on the forehead. The hot iron seal was a permanent, visible mark of the city's judgment, a public spectacle designed to show the populace that justice had been served. Yet, immediately after the decisive actions of 1472, a crushing silence returned. No one bothered to record what happened to Els or the other women. The files closed, the paperwork was archived, and the council had, in their own estimation, punished the keepers and protected its own conscience and treasury. We are left with the most profound, cynical question. Who compensated Els for her stolen youth, her lost child, and her lifelong trauma? The city's elaborate self-correction mechanism only activated when the scandal was too loud to be ignored. This entire episode proved a chilling, enduring truth. Local ties, civic pride, and guaranteed profit often weighed far more than a single disposable human life. The legal file snapped shut, but the moral ledger remained open. That unresolved space leads us to the mirror of power the final section holds up to each of us. The mirror of power and the call to action. The harrowing, forgotten story of Els and the Nördlingen brothel is a profound lesson that teaches us four essential, unsettling truths about power, society, and morality that are as relevant today as they were in 1472. 1. The system, in its relentless pursuit of order and revenue, will always find a way to legalize exploitation and call it stability. By officially owning the brothel, Nördlingen didn't abolish the sin, it merely integrated it into the civic budget, giving institutional cover to a crime. They sanitized the filth with a city seal and called it an evil necessity. 2. The law is often selectively blind. It will only find the rot at the heart of the matter if someone shoves the door open with a scream of undeniable truth. Ells's testimony was the only thing capable of forcing the hand of a council that preferred comfortable ignorance. Justice rarely comes knocking. It must be dragged into the light. 3. Silence is the most potent weapon of the powerful, but it's the most treacherous trap for the vulnerable. The beatings, the threats, the debt slavery, all were designed to enforce silence. Elsa's decision to speak was an act of profound, revolutionary defiance. 4. When profit is on the table, morality often takes a swift and decisive backseat. The scandal only became actionable when the revenue stream was jeopardized by public outrage, not when the abuse began. The city's primary loyalty was to the bottom line and its public image, not to the safety of the women it employed. This history demands a personal reckoning. You must inhabit the shoes of the characters whose moral choices defined this tragedy. If you were Els, would you choose to speak your truth to the powerful Lionheart, or would you take the deal for freedom and be forever silent? If you were Barbell, would you risk the inevitable retribution and potential expulsion to speak out? And finally, if you were on the city council, would you open the investigation out of a true hunger for justice? Or would your decision be driven purely by the fear that the crowd would mention your name in the tavern tonight? Answer those 3 questions honestly, and you'll understand precisely why this story matters. It's not distant history. It's a terrifying, perfect mirror of how power works, and the moral compromises we are all asked to make. You're still here? Good. Because you've seen a blueprint of exploitation, you've seen how a city turned vice into revenue and tragically transformed human beings into cost. The system looked unshakable.
He found me.
But all it took for that entire structure to shake was one scream, the scream of a single woman who refused to let her pain be silenced. The first crack in any wall of oppression is always thin, but one day, with persistence and the light of truth, it will be wide enough for the light to get in. If you want more stories of those whom history forgot, those who fought back against silent, institutionalized injustice hit, subscribe. Then, let me know in the comments, if you were Barbell, knowing the risk, would you speak? Your answer is a window into your own moral courage.